It's 5 minutes after 7. This is Morning Express, and it's time for The Way It Is. And joining us now on the set, we already had Ambrose Weda, but now joining us is Senator Omar Hassan, who is Senator Mombasa County, who is also the Secretary General for Wiper Party. Good to have you, and how are you doing today?
Very well.
Okay, you had a good weekend?
Great weekend. It's Ramadan now. We are almost halfway through today, day 14. And we use this month for greater spiritual engagement. So half of the time we spend it in centers of worship and doing the necessary in terms of worship. And there's been a visiting lecturer from US, Sayyid Amar, and he's of the Shia faith, but has been giving very broad lectures to the worshippers there. They're a very knowledgeable young guy. So therefore we've been engaging. You make sure that by the time, they tell Muslims, it's a time for fasting, not feasting. And also to open up your horizons. It's time also to broaden your knowledge base.
All right, let's get to matters at hand on matters politics. And of course, we do know that we had 8 legislators who were locked up last week, but as per Friday, they were released on bail. And of course, one of the questions that we're asking this morning, and let me also pose it to you, is whether that was a blessing in disguise, given some of the testimonials that we're getting from them regarding the fact that while they were in there, they also had time to soul search and literally just engage, and found out that the differences between Kenyans is very narrow, especially politically speaking, once now they got to engage.
A friend was yesterday telling me, actually that little time might have been correctional, because I think when they came out, they all came out with the right rhetoric. Not that I admit to the entire process, but they came out with greater rhetoric. I'm told, I did not watch him, but I'm told about Moses Kuria was extremely restrained when he came out on particularly one of the TV shows. One of your competitors hosted him that evening or the next evening, and I'm told even when he was being tried, they were pushing him to the usual outrage. He was very, very restrained. Therefore, it does mean that a certain, thing happened. I saw them when they had been released. They appeared, the body language appeared fairly friendlier in terms of the people who had been in the cell for 6 days. 3 nights, the 6 members of the National Assembly and Senator Mudama. So I think they must have been conversations. And when have you ever tried to sit down somewhere in one stop for about 2 to 3 hours? It can get really, really draining from a psychological point of view. So you can imagine these 6 people in one room where they say they could hardly stand or sleep. So therefore, half of the time they're probably awake. And the only way, and you didn't even probably have a sense of time. And you didn't know when next, what next. And therefore, they must have had all the conversations you could imagine.
Well, they had all
the
the time to literally engage and talk to one another.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Ambrose, whether your take on whether that is good for the country, especially given that these are leaders who are very vocal, very loud, but they came out somehow mellowed down from the experience.
I think the experience was good. Human beings can have big egos. Big, egoistic. You sometimes you feel like you are God, you are above. Sometimes you speak and you think you're speaking for President Uhuru, and you think President Uhuru is all powerful. Or you speak and you think you're speaking for the court leadership and Raila Odinga, they're all powerful. So your ego is punctured when you are put in a dingy cell, and the same leaders are either quiet or they're equally helpless. They would like to help you, but there's nothing much they can do for you. So I just imagine, somebody like Korea has been in and out of cells for some time. So it's not as humbling as it is for Senator Mudama. Good suit, good goggles. Now you are down there peeing at the same place Korea is peeing and doing all this. It's very humbling, and the ego goes down. And then they realize at the end of the day, we do these things the same. It makes them realize we are Kenyans, we are having the same blood. And it's not just this one. Remember Machage, the current Senator Migori? He was also locked in and then went through the process of hate speech. And although he was acquitted kidogo. Up to now, he went quiet.
It
You
seems
never
to have
hear
tamed
him.
him
So it
completely.
is a good trend for these MPs, and they should know that when they talk, words have a price. In civil courts, they can go as far as 10 million shillings. In other areas, you can be in Pangani, and even in Shimolatewa. In other places, you can also speak yourself to the presidency. So whichever words you use, there's a price on it, either going up or going down.
Two things. First, I agree totally that political leaders must be measured in their utterances. But also, let's not use the crime of hate speech to gag, free speech.
Yes, because that was the next point I was going to, and that is in regards to whether it is good for us when now it may be used negatively.
Absolutely. That's why, for me, I thought that when the hate speech legislation was being crafted, I was one of those in the KNCHR who actually opposed it. Because I know sometimes there are statements, fair statements. When you say, for instance, something like when there's an ethnic audit, and you present the findings of those ethnic audits that do definitely demonstrate skewed appointments in public offices. That's a fact. So you cannot use hate speech to gag a fact. So it should not be used also to push the vice of ethnicity within the arrangement of government. Hate speech is bad. Ethnicity in the arrangement of government is equally wrong. So therefore, there must be a balance. And I know that sometimes when you're not necessarily tutored in the school of law or human rights, and you're a political pawn, then you might end up using part of this discourse in a manner as to gag opposition.
Right.
Because it's opposition sometimes that goes fairly in a manner that one wants to believe it's hate speech. So that is, for me, a fundamental question. So I want the KNCHR sometimes also to partner a lot more in terms of setting the parameters of what hate speech is and what hate speech is not. There are certain statements that will have to be uttered that are statements of fact. If you have appointed your kinsman in a parastatal, demonstrably in a manner that is skewed, when we say that you have appointed your kinsman, we should not now start to say, oh, do you see that he's hate speeching? So this type of situation, we must not also, the downside of it is that the oppressor will use that legislation to stifle free debate and therefore
gag those who might want to.
But just one thing before Ambrose comes in. It's a debate I thought I need to wade in. I have seen people talking about the humbling or the dehumanizing situations of confinement that my colleagues were put in. I have fought for 5 years or more than when I was in the KNCHR about improving the standard and conditions of confinement in Kenya so that human dignity is preserved. I have argued for that again and again and again. In my assessment, what was subjected to my colleagues is simply what we have provided for, even in terms of budget. 50 years after independence, we have not thought about sanitizing our conditions or jails. So rather than my sister Aisha giving money to rehabilitate one cell,
right,
she should go and make an amendment or go to the budgeting process that is happening right now and provide money to uplift the standards of confinement so that it provides for basic minimum decency and dignity of human persons. So that then we invest, most of these colonial, jails did not make provisions for loose toilets. If you go to the basement of the modern, Milimani Court, there are loose everywhere. And they are fairly clean, I saw them. So I've never been to the basement. They have so many cells, they have so many loose, and all of them are functional.
And again,
I think if we really, so it is not about one Mudaiga cell. It should be about the holistic approach in terms of how we manage. And
generally just maintaining human dignity all round. It's not just about that.
For me, they should not only be preaching now for peace and and togetherness. For me now, it's a call to action that you need to improve our policing system. We need to improve, the police stations. We need to improve, the jails. In fact, there have been fundamental transformation in the jailing system in Kenya, which I think is correctional.
Ambrose, before we come back to the reforms that need to be done, in the prisons and the police in general, regarding hate speech, is it clearer now what hate speech is than it was before? Because like Senator says, it could also now be used negatively to gag and ensure that those people who are seen to be speaking too much, and sometimes they just be quoting facts, to be used against them as though it's hate speech. Is it clear what hate speech is?
No. Hate speech is very, very, very clear. Let's use the example of his party leader, Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka. He's never been accused of any hate speech. Whenever he speaks, he's never spoken of something that creates fear, despondency, or hate. When you tell a community that Kikuyu should lie low like an envelope, you know the way an envelope is? Or you say Luos will all be circumcised. Or you tell them, get out of Rift Valley. You don't then say that, oh, I was just doing this and this and this. The leaders, take, for instance, even Honorable Orengo is an activist, also MP activist and very vocal. But how comes all his words, and he speaks a lot, how comes all his words do not alienate?
Classified as hate speech.
But when my brother Kuria speaks, or my brother Muthama speaks, or Ngujiri, or Junet, they just pick the words free. There are about 500,000 words available for use the world over. So when you pick the wrong ones, you pay this price. And interestingly, hate speech can be designed by anybody. Immediately you are tight, somebody will be like, even you, your soul, your spirit tells you, that was wrong, I shouldn't have said it. So the leaders who think it will be used to gag, we are telling them, you use it, we will arrest you. In fact, the presumption is that you are innocent, but your innocence will be as you are inside. As about the conditions of jail, it should not be that it is only when now MPs are locked in. Now they are very hot about improving the conditions. We should be improving society so that people don't go to jail.
And Honorable Mudi Awori was very key on making some reforms in the...
Yes, he did a lot. Then the rest went to sleep, especially your party leader, he took over the position. And then just went to sleep. He didn't know that his team will be inside. It is good to have modern institutions. Some of these police cells were built when Kenya had 1 million people. Now we have 40 million. So there are more people being charged, there are more people being arrested, and therefore we need to improve this. But it's not a priority just because the leaders went in. In fact, it appears that whenever leaders go into jail, they come out very humbled. Mandela came out a very humbled man, and we had the best leader.
Okay.
Honorable Raila went in.
But it's not about leaders going in. Let me tell you, and I hate to cite this example, but whenever some high profile, in quotes, victims come off of process, the value of advocacy goes higher. Let me cite this, and I cite it with a lot of hesitation. I remember we were talking about curbing extrajudicial executions in this country. Yeah, they were killing young Kikuyu male poor. That was profiling. If you're young, Kikuyu, male, and poor, you simply fitted in the whole matrix of being a Mungiki. So even if you are just a normal passersby and the police pull the trigger on your head, you will say that we've just killed a Mungiki adherent. So what then happened once? And the man is now condemned, the police officer. He shot the son of Honorable P.K. Muiruri, Dr. Muiruri, at Westlands. And his first communication to base was that he shot a Mungiki. Only for us to realize later that it was Honorable Muiruri's son. That shifted the advocacy against extrajudicial... absolutely. A very doctor. He was a doctor of law. He was a doctor of law. So that shifted the advocacy at a higher crescendo. So the elite now galvanized that you must end extrajudicial executions. So, but every day these days we condemn young, poor people in our informal settlements to death. Every other day they are being shot in neighborhoods. So, but when that happened, there was call to action. Saitoti moved. Everybody moved at that point in time. We went to Geneva. We started to stop it. We started giving statements against it. So what happens if you tell people, if you tell legislators, allocate money for the improvement of the conditions of jail, they will tell you, oh my God, why? Why are we improving it? These are criminals. But now when you see that you can be held there for 4 nights or 3 nights.
And literally go through what they go through.
Absolutely, the ordinary citizen on a daily basis, the kind of indignation we subject them to, then it pushes the level of advocacy. So today when you want to push to add money, you already have 4 or 5 members who will support it even without much debate or much question.
After having gone
because
through
these experiences are the best teachers, they say. So I think these are some of the issues. So I'm not saying it's a special case. I'm saying there has been agitation by human rights actors for all this time. All along. That do this, have this, allow access to medical treatment, allow access to legal counsel, make sure that there is police reform so that the OCS is the person in charge. He does not have to take any orders from above. He is able to admit and to release on certain precautionary standards that are given within the National Police Service Act. Therefore, once now people see that the need to have independence and reforms and everything else incidental to the human rights standards that have been set in terms of the rights of an arrested person, then people will start to advocate for those
I think I just want to add, if that's the formula admitted by the senator, that when the experience in the agitation is high, then it is high time we have a law, even we amend the constitution to read that public officers, leaders like him, they go to public hospitals and they take their children to public schools. Then things will work very well. Because they'll see what Kenyans go through when they go to Kenyatta Hospital. They see it when they go to Jaramogi Oginga Odinga Hospital or Level 5 or Bongoma, where you go there, you are injected with, you are being, the child is being, how do we call it? They're giving the injections and they get paralyzed. So actually should have been the governor's people. Then they say, hey. So at that rate, I recommend that we need as a country to enforce a law where leaders use our public facilities.
Okay, Senator, but why do we have to have a situation whereby it's only after, it's like a knee-jerk reaction, just like the one that you've quoted. We have a reaction because a leader's
That's
child.
exactly what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be. That's why I'm saying whether with or without those victims. In fact, most of the human rights agitation happens because the majority of those who are most disenfranchised in society, most dispossessed, most oppressed, are the ones who suffer the double jeopardy of ill treatment. So that's why people always agitate on account of the majority. But then what happens, the policymakers and duty bearers don't see the need for it. I was being informed that Ole Tiptip was Minister for Home Affairs, and he was told to improve the conditions of jail. He didn't do it. When he became a jailbird himself, he said he wished he had improved the conditions of jail at that time. So what happens is, most of this agitation happens, but it is the policymakers who sometimes are averse to these types of agitations. So when so suddenly tragedy strikes them or something strikes them hard, then they become now more conscious of that fact. So for me, it's never based on the majority. I've said it, even in Parliament many a times, that we must pass legislation that if you, how can you be the Minister for Education, how can you be the CEC for Education in your county, and then not take the people to the same schools, your kids that you supposedly preside over as minister? How can you be my Professor Nyong? How can you be Beth Mugo and not go to Kenyatta National Hospital for chemotherapy when you suffer cancer? And at that time, both of you are the ministers for health simultaneously. So these are some of the contradictions we have in this society. This society and this politics is skewed against the poor and the weak. And that's why we need to have basic standards, or people who relate with some of the struggles of the poor. And I think once we start humbling political leaders, they start to relate a little more with the struggles of those.
They begin to at least identify with what is happening. Yeah, talking about that humbling, and whether coming to you, looking at the fact that so far we don't have any convictions, and of course we'll let the law take its course. Yes. But could that also be another way that will ensure that hate speech becomes a thing of the past, when we actually see leaders who are doing time or charged by a court of law, because that seems to be a problem. When they go in, and the NCIC chair, Ole Kaparo, has constantly complained, and I'm not sure if it's blame shifting, but he has said that the judicial system is working against them, in that once they take them to court, they are released on bail or have it free.
No, I think Ole Kaparo would be very wrong. The right to bail is a constitutional right. And then what you take to court, some of these people, when they speak, they just need to get good prosecutors. Just good prosecutors who will not talk too much. Just show the court. And I can see now the courts in this country, from the way they dilly-dallied over the granting of the bail, you could see that it was not the police who kept these people. You could see that it's the court that decided they will be inside for some time. Now you can, therefore, I can tell you out of my years of experience that the courts are angling to jail somebody for hate speech. They are very ready. They will be let down by the prosecution. What do I mean by that? They wait too long and then they bring weak evidence. If somebody says, for instance, that you buy pangas and slash the Luos or those who are opposed to so and so, that's good enough. You come and you get just one person to come and say, yes, on this day I was there and I was shooting this thing. I shot, this is the camera we used to shoot this, and it is it was bought in Germany or wherever, and I was there. You don't need 100 people. Enough. Somebody will go in. When one leader goes in, the country will be saved for another 30 years. So that complaint, he is complaining because he doesn't know. And then when you blame the court, you blame the very person who wants to assist you, instead of saying, how do we do it? The spirit is killed. I think there is sufficient evidence. It is the prosecution. And some of us here are ready to assist. If Tobiko was to give me 1 or 2 cases to prosecute these guys, even my close friends, I would do a fantastic job, and they know.
One day, Justice Gisheru, who was fairly a reserved person, agreed to officiate and preside over an activity at the KNCHR. And I think, and at that time, the police had heightened the crescendo that suspects that were presenting to court were either being freed or being given bail and stuff of that nature. Justice Gisheru, reserved as it might be, he said, I'm not a hangman. Give me evidence. I can just not lock up people because you brought them to court.
Yes.
So what let's talk about is the entire criminal justice system. In terms, from the point of investigations, there must be quality, credible investigations. Like I can tell you, quite a number of those cases that were of those people brought up on Friday will not stand. It's evident. Mudamas will be the first dismissal. You know, they cannot stand. You know. Secondly, is a question of DPP's discretion. The DPP was given that discretion so that he can be able not to just take everything to court, but ask for certain ends to be tightened in terms of his evidence in chief. Thirdly, is a question of the right, as you say, it's competent prosecution, how you prosecute a matter. And therefore, there's been an influx of a fairly well-averaged people in terms of, or good people within the DPP's office. I must commend Tobiko for raising quite substantially the bar, or in terms of the quality of prosecutions has gone far much higher. And I can tell you time and again, once in a while I've seen the prosecution stand ground. Then this was one of the times when they should stand ground when a file is flowed. So I think that's how we need to prosecute our entire criminal justice chain. Because quite a number of these high profiles, those of us who enjoy certain leverage in society, can bring together some of the most senior counsels in this country and just demolish the weight of your case. In fact, the only reason the 4 of them spent those 3 nights in prison behind bars is largely because it's a court discretion. But if it was a matter of evidence, I hardly think that
you would not have spent even a single night.
It was the court's discretion. The court can use its discretion at times, based on the great principles upon how they can and cannot grant bail. So he used that discretion that you can decide on account of public interest to hold persons for a certain period of time, so that public interest is served. So the court was speaking to public interest, that I think in my assessment that they want everybody to tone down. You know, that's what he was trying to imply. Mr. Honorable Ogembo, when he refused to grant those orders at that point in time.
In fact, let me just add that, you see, even the police acted emotionally. They act with the people, the populace. When people say, oh, this is hate speech, we need to arrest people, what they would have done, immediately somebody speaks. Because these people speak in front of live camera from registered media houses. Instead of arresting these people, you will go to the media house and say, who was in this function? You'll be told, Gatonga was there. Gatonga, was you there between this time and this time? Yes. Where's the camera you are using? This one. Where's the recording? This one. You take all that, and then you tell you, did you, how, then you record your statement. I was standing in this place, I was here, I was so and so, I captured this on my camera. You are the witness, number one, to tell you'll be, and you can be compelled. Then you gather the next, then you go and arrest the guy. But them, it is like, oh, so and so has spoken in the morning, by 10 o'clock he has been arrested. There's no evidence.
So if it's that simple, Ambrose, yes. Why is it then by design that the evidence is...
It is ignorance. It is simple but technical. For instance, for you to tender evidence from that camera, you must have its serial number presented to court. There must have been where it was bought from, so that people don't frame each other. There must be, the prerequisite is what is more fundamental. Even if you use your phone, it must have been, it's not a phone you picked from Gekomba, it must have been a phone with a serial number, registered and working. So that somebody can say this camera was working well, all these things. Now, the police don't know that. Then they're just, where is whether he has spoken? So when we meet in court, then you try to bring in that thing. Then you say, now bring, which camera was that? What is the serial number? The police doesn't know. Where was it bought? Was it in good working condition? Can there somebody come to confirm whether it was working or this was a fake one?
Okay. Let me tell you, in fact, just to build on Weda's point.
Yes.
Is a critical issue of the responsibility of the media.
Yes.
If I stood somewhere and said all Muslims are terrorists and they need to be killed,
yes,
and you air that,
yes,
you know, let's give this example because it's safer. If you said something else, it could be misconceived.
Right.
Because I'm a Muslim myself. So when you stand somewhere and say all Muslims, and then in his right mind,
yes,
Michael G. Gitonga
yes,
decides to air that,
yes,
and goes through all the editorial rigors of KTN,
yes,
from the person who's filing the story, to the editors and the editors, and then to the person who's reading it on
the anchor,
Linda Ogutu, for instance. Is there a responsibility somewhere there? You know, that's
on
also
on
the journalist himself or herself, because that's one of the reasons. And I'm not trying to test the credibility or otherwise of what Ocampo did, was to bring Joshua Arap Sang, was to demonstrate media as a tool of genocide or crimes against halaiki, mass crimes. That's why in Rwanda, quite a number of leading journalists have been jailed for genocide, because they were the ones, you know, calling people cockroaches on media and asking people to kill cockroaches, who's the Tutsi. So I think these are some of the areas of responsibility one must plug in terms of the responsibility of the media. At no cost should we gag free speech, and at no cost should we allow General Kaiseri to ban the things that he thinks we should ban in the media just to sanitize it. But in terms when you sit as 5, 6 senior editors, women and men, who are evaluating what should come onto the screens, I think you need to apply your minds in a manner as to also mitigate what should and should not run.
In a responsible manner.
In a responsible
manner.
But
going back to Weda's comments there in regards to, the reason why some of these convictions are not made is simply because the evidence is flawed. There are so many holes, and of course we do know that it's supposed to be proved beyond any reasonable doubt. Yet, when we look at some of the footage, I mean, one would say, even from a layman's perspective, it is evidence enough.
That's why most of the charges were no longer hate speech anymore. In fact, apart from one charge, the rest was just incitement to violence. The crime of hate speech has a much higher threshold. It must demonstrate intent. It must demonstrate that specific group that was being targeted. So even Mudamo, none of them was charged, apart from one person. Yes. None was charged with hate speech. Yes. It was incitement to violence, including Moses Kuria. So that said and done, Ngujiri, I think, was the one charged with hate speech. So that said and done, the threshold is very high. And that's why I'm saying, as the country is emotive, as Weda puts it, yes, the police, the law is not a matter of public opinion. The law is the law. It is averse to public opinion. That's why the most notorious terrorists can be granted bail. That's why the most heinous person can be released. In your assessment, you almost profile these people. That's why the presumption of innocence reigns supreme in our constitution. So that said and done, so it's not up to what the public feels. It's what the facts say. And most of these crimes, the crime of hate speech, it's in a league of its own. It's so difficult in terms of its threshold. So I think if the limitations of the Constitution also says incitement to violence, warmongering and things of that nature are also within that limitation.
Okay. All right. Ambrose, as we now wind up on this particular issue of arrest and all that,
yes.
But we look at also the IEBC issue, which
yes.
we seem to be seeing light at the end of the tunnel. Would you say it's too early for us to sigh a sigh of relief, or can we know that that's a done deal and now move on as a country?
I keep on repeating and I say, whether or not IEBC commissioners will leave is a matter of time.
It's just a matter of time.
It was a matter of time, it remains a matter of time, and it will be a matter of time. The way it is, they will not preside over the coming elections. And that's why one time I appealed to them and said, my brothers, don't wait for blood to flow freely. You leave. Don't even wait for the money. It is not worth it. So if that is the only issue that is creating commotion in the country, then it is a done deal. But you never know, court will spring up something else. This one, I think from there they go to Supreme Court, from Supreme Court they may just want the president himself.
Well, at least one at a time, and if it's IEBC...
if it is IEBC, it's done.
It's a done deal.
It's a done deal, and I'm telling you, I don't think it will take long. 2-3 weeks, these guys are out.
Your comments on possibly some of the 4 things that they require, one of them being the fact that the president and the opposition leader are the ones to sign off what the parliament finally comes up with.
Actually, what is there is it still has to go through Parliament. An agreement has to be done. That is taken to Parliament. The IEBC Act is amended to give them a way out. And the part that the commissioners have to do is they must accept to leave. If they refuse, then a tribunal will be necessary. But again, that one, when the president and the other, when the team is combined, they can shout at you using loudspeakers, and you just leave office.
Well, I think Issa Kassan has also mentioned that.
Then it goes to Parliament, the legislation is done. If there's a package for them, they are given. And then the contentious part which will have to be sorted out is the selection panel. Who will appoint it? The current law, the president will have to appoint 4, and then there are 2 others from other organizations. This will be very contentious. So this will be worked out, how the interest of CORD team is taken into account, the interest of Jubilee is taken into account, and then new people are given a chance, because we also have to advertise the jobs, new people come in, and they settle as quickly as possible.
Now, let me discuss this dispassionately of the fact that I'm a CORD member. And now I also talk as a legislator, and I see the debate in Parliament. They're like, ultimately, it is for the principals on both sides to rally their troops. In terms of parliamentary independence, or independence of the various arms of Parliament, people feel that it is for Raila Odinga to tell, and Kalonzo Musyoka and Moses Wetangula to rally the CORD people to vote for whatever agreement that comes of it. Much in the same way the commitment by Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto is to get their members to vote for that proposition. But Parliament, I'm hearing the hesitation of it just simply rubber stamping an instrument. In terms of the precedence it will be setting, you know. So after you get a constitution, the next phase is institution building. Institution building means you strengthen institutions of government and governance generally across the board. So for me, I will vote for whatever outcome if it is the negotiated settlement. But it should not be a condition that Parliament must enact it. It must be such that we must rally our political troops. So the commitment here must come directly from Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, that they will ensure that they mobilize the Jubilee forces to append in whatever parliamentary group meeting, so that they look magnanimous in terms of seeing this deal through. And Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka and Wetangula to do the same. Because I've had the argument, not in principle, not a question of partisan now, in principle that let's not set precedences that can hurt this country eventually. You see, like that time, as much as it was signed outside the KNDR, Kenya National Dialogue and Reconciliation efforts, as much as it was signed outside Parliament, there was that general need at that time to bring stability to the country. So everybody went and voted for the instrument. But to create a compulsion kind of is a little, is also an affront to the various independence of these organs, because that Parliament is a center for debate. It is a center for discourse. It is supposed to, even if 100% of the members want to ascribe to that, let them do so. But if there's one person who wants to document his name in history, that I have opposed it, let there be also that room for him or her to do so. That is, I think, the basic principle.
I think they are now coming back to what the president has all along been saying.
That's my position, by the way.
Yeah, that's your position.
Senators,
that's a very sober position. And that's what the president has been saying all along, that this thing has to be a legal process. It has to go through Parliament. And so that Parliament does also appear to be rubber stamping. And the easier way then would have been to go through parliamentary committees. But you agree in principle outside that you would want this and this and this reflected. Then Parliament takes it, they negotiate on it, they then work out a legislation that takes into account the principles. But CORD on the other side, Honorable Raila Odinga said, we negotiate outside and then we take it to Parliament. And that's where the president has been saying, no, I don't have a control. I don't have control over this. These are not my children that I can go there with a rungu and say, enact this. They will refuse.
Why have I said that? Mombasa was severely disadvantaged with the first generation of revenue sharing formula. And every revenue sharing formula was a consensus outside Parliament. We were in retreats, we were everywhere. And I kept raising my point that we as Mombasa cannot, I as Mombasa Senator cannot support this revenue sharing arrangement. We need to bridge the fiscal gap, responsibility. We need to bridge the gap of wage bills and many other considerations that needed to come into it. And ultimately, when I got an opportunity, I lobbied my colleagues to vote against the proposed first formula. And finally, we had to now renegotiate the formula. But before that formula even started the processes of generating a new formula, go to the parliamentary records. There was always one vote that voted nay. That was my vote. Because as a matter of principle, I wanted to state myself in the records that I do not agree with this formula. As much as all of you will take it forward, I do not agree with this formula. Ultimately, and everybody knew, and some of these positions, we even went into code PGs, and we said this is a good position, and I will protest it. And when I went to Parliament or the Senate, I will vote against it. So that's why I thought in those unique circumstances, in fact, the dissent in many of these broad arrangements is usually minor. Even last week, we had this Political Parties Act. Only one of our colleagues said this act, we took a position, we vote for it, the amendment, and one of our colleagues said no. In a very objective manner. And he put his no. So therefore, let us allow a leverage for one or two people to tell us why they think that settlement is wrong.
It's wrong.
So I think in terms of just the principle, in terms of the principle, that's why I'm talking from my own little experience, that I've had to vote no on arrangements on the redivision of revenue severally, not once, not twice, but many a times. I was the single voice, yet CORD had taken a position, Jubilee had taken a position, yet there was a consensus in Senate. But immediately they reviewed the formula. And I thought Mombasa had gained. Now I started voting yes.
You're able to say a yes. All right, let's move on to other things because time is
But
fast
I just
spent.
wanted to, I saw this headline this morning.
Yes.
And what I laughed at, how Kenyans
Well,
bury,
the teachers
how Kenyans bury billions. I'm using billions for their burials. I went for a fundraiser for funeral expenses. As I was walking out, one young man told me, Senator, mimi nichangie wakati niko hai, nikifa usije. So, you know, that for me was metaphorical. That we need this money when we are alive and not when we are dead. He told me live, he says, wallahi, mimi nichangie sahi, alafu nikifa usije, nishawambia family wewe usije wakati nikifa.
Actually, Weda gave us a very good example. He was saying there's a man in his village who died because he was not able to have 10,000 shillings for surgery. But his funeral was worth what? Over a million?
Almost half a million. Yes. And everybody, you range in Nairobi, Mombasa, Eldoret, everybody is contributing.
And you see, like,
M-Pesa line for funeral, but no M-Pesa line for medical expenses.
Like, when those of us in a certain level die, yes. There's even chop of an area for chopper landing.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll find 10, 15 choppers. Yeah, the one day when I went for the funeral of the daughter of the former chairman of the Council of Governors, Isaac Ruto, unfortunately lost the daughter at some point. And when we went for the funeral, I think there was a battery because almost all the 47 governors that attended
were there.
And if you saw the litany of the choppers that were parked there, and most of the times also the funerals have become a theater for politics. So a lot of politicians, and I know politicians will take a chopper so that they can hop through several funerals in one weekend. So that type of a situation. So if you had given that money to the family, it probably would have done far more
gone a long way.
Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, moving on and coming back to the judiciary, and Wade, I'd like to hear what your comments are given what was happening the whole of last week. We have the CJ now who has retired and left, as it were, not really a gap, but very shaky ground.
No, you remember that question was asked last week, and I said the CJ should retire. There's no crisis. It will come. It is two people who just didn't want to go home and take a rest and enjoy taxpayers' money, 65 million shillings, security, a vehicle. They just wanted to hang on. But God Almighty, Jehovah Jireh, also knew that it is time to leave. So they are gone. What remains is to replace the CJ, the deputy CJ, and another judge. The advert is already out. But those who are qualified like me, if I want, I will apply. The JSC will look at it. If I'm able, I'm given a job. There is no crisis. The crisis was being created by people who claim, people who don't want to call it a day. There was no position of a DCJ. You are a DCJ, then you say I should be a DCJ until I'm 74. Very ridiculous arguments. There was no Supreme Court. You go there to serve in Supreme Court, then you say, for me, I should have served up to 7. Very basic but ridiculous, selfish argument. But because God loves Kenya, he always brings solutions very quickly, and they are there. So there's no crisis in my view.
Okay.
Our crisis is just to continue hoping for a Chief Justice who will allow personal and judicial independence the way Mutunga allowed it.
Okay.
You know, for me, now I can say this, that Mutunga is no longer Chief Justice. You know, I joined politics largely based on his influence. And that discussion is maybe for another day. And even the day when he came to give his speech in the Senate, I was stamping my feet more than anybody else because he spoke to the activism language. He spoke to many things, social justice, human rights, the rule of law. And therefore, so I followed him almost to the very exit, the time he handed back his plate number and his flag. And the words he said there at the very end is instructive. He said, Justice Muhammad Ibrahim takes over as the presiding judge of the president of the Supreme Court, and therefore acting Chief Justice. He talked about Justice Kihara, about being the president of the Court of Appeal. He talked of the principal judge of the High Court, and he talked about the Chief Registrar. He said, I want to disabuse this notion that the judiciary is the Chief Justice, and that all these organs are still functional and working. Today, if you spew hatred here, you will be in court tomorrow. That is how effective. The cause list is out. My wife is a lawyer, many other, Ambrose Weda is a lawyer. There is a cause list out. So the Chief Justice is not the judiciary. So therefore, institutionally, the judiciary is totally intact. And we like to play to drama. I think Justice Tonui and Justice Rawal did not need to put us through the drama. I think they added to the discredit sort of perceived of the Supreme Court. And therefore, it was important for them to appear to be fairly neutral or to say that this is time when I take a walk. So that they will have left probably with Willie on the same day. Will have looked like a magnanimous, exit for all of them. And it will have it now gives us an opportunity, depending on these lawyers. If these credible lawyers will apply or not, is what will get the Chief Justice. The Chief Justice does not come from the moon. So they must have good men and women out there who must apply for these positions so that we get the right judiciary, jurists and lawyers of standing and not that we know of, who can push on this transformative idea that the judiciary has imbibed.
Has had so far. And your comments, Weda, on the performance of Chief Justice Willie Mutunga. There's been some who have said that, yes, he has done a good job. Others have said that he brought in reforms that he did not follow through and has not followed through to the end.
I think if you have been practicing law for all these years, then you look at the time Willie Mutunga came in and after. I think he did a great job. He had his own failings, but to me, those are the failings that were his strengths. In other words, he was able to delegate. People, when they take offices, they think they are God. They think it is them or death. He was able to delegate and to stand aside and remain the figurehead that is required. In fact, it's like he confined himself at the Supreme Court. He didn't seem to be interfering with the registrar of the court. He didn't seem to be interfering with the Court of Appeal. But the greatest achievement he brought is that his actions insulated the court from external influences. He has left the court that is so strong that it can stand up against the president. And that's what we have been crying for over the years. We need a court where you can tell the president, forget it. That has been lacking since independence. And that he has done. So you add that, then he himself, he also set a precedent where he does not interfere with judges. He does not call them rule like this, rule like that. So everybody has grown on their own. That independence is all we need. Then we get judges who are brilliant enough. And the country moves. So to me, the short period has been a Chief Justice. He's done marvelous.
A good job.
We will record it better
after
another 5 years. That when we look back, when another Randy Chief Justice may come in, then we say, Mutunga, where are you? Just come back.
Okay. Senator,
like there's this issue, which you have to...
Very quickly, because there's a question here I'd like you to answer. As you do that, there's somebody who's asking the Senator to explain why 0.001 of county spends money only on bridge and lights and nothing else.
When I looked at Mutunga's wealth declaration form, that demonstrated to you a person who committed himself to service over wealth. Mutunga said in terms of his ownership, I think he said he had a car, valued very meagerly, maybe it's just for a standard news host, He had a flat. So his net value was hardly anywhere in about 70 to 80 million shillings.
It was below 100 million.
It was below 100 million.
Yeah.
So I tried to compute that. I was at labor. In fact, I was at pains to even, be liberal. And that shows you a person who committed himself to service over wealth. And I think the fact that he did not have a corrupt heart and mind allowed him to be independent. You have these straight jackets of your independence the minute you start pushing for deals and taking money and taking bribes and starting to steal, starting to dip your hand into the county treasury, into the national treasury. That's when now you are webbed. Yeah? So we want people who have overcome greed, the ones who are not moved by material greed. Their conscience is clear. That is the one thing. That's a legacy, sounding legacy. Definitely was not 100%. But as Weda said, his testimony. Those who entered the courtrooms at a certain point and who enter them now will tell you the fundamental difference.
The difference.
Just in terms of finishing up with the backlogs, in terms of the number of advocates, judges who've been employed in that last 5 years, it has made the judiciary fairly functional. And one feels that there's an institution called the judiciary, which sits aside as one of the arms of government, not as a subsidiary arm or tool of any of these two other arms. So that itself was point enough. And I'm told lawyers go to courts fairly more energized. Then he did away with all these old traditions. Some of these things are symbolic, but go a long way. You didn't have to necessarily rob yourself almost to a point of suffocation. Yeah, so you could sometimes, you see the way they prosecuted the Rawal case, and you could not have gone into the highest tier of the Supreme Court without your wig, and that regalia. So I think that in itself also gives Kenya a unique institutional practice for us also to define our own traditions in terms of how we want to pursue the legal.
Let me just give the Kenyans an example. Before the advent of the Mutunga administration, when a judge was walking along the corridors, it was like God himself has descended.
Reincarnated.
God reincarnated. It would be a very solemn walk, and everybody's bowing. And
the Lordship.
And what was interesting, a judge would pass and he will be bow, my Lord, and will smile. Then when they walk away, you say, this one is very lazy, this one is very ignorant. That was very common. But they look like God. In fact, that's why many people wanted to become judges, because you are somehow like a God. When he came in, all that dissipated. You could even call him, Bwana Mutunga, I would like to see you. Then he says, oh, come, what is it? We became human beings. And that was very good.
We used to call him, we called him Willie. And then at some point, people started calling him Honorable Lordship. He asked those of us who knew him in another life, when did that change? So he remained Willie.
He remained Willie.
That's the whole thing.
All right. Gentlemen, I think we'll have to wind it up right there because of time. And I can see quite a number of comments coming through. There was a question as to why most of the money in the county is only going towards bridges and lights and nothing else.
That's somebody who's trying to bring in Mombasa politics. But what he's trying to say is that there are a set of missed priorities. That people go more for window dressing rather than the core of what the devolution was supposed to do.
Okay. There's also a gentleman who says here that you are definitely, Hassan, you are a governor in waiting for Mombasa County, no doubt about it. So there you go. I know.
I will be your chief officer. I will prepare for a presidential bid.
So I think we'll have to wind it up right there, gentlemen. Thank you very much. That's Hassan Omar, the Mombasa County Senator. I almost said governor there, but I'll get into trouble for that. Senator, Mombasa County. But also, he is the Secretary General for Wiper Party and also
Wiper Democratic Movement.
Sorry?
It's not a party, it's a movement.
It's a movement. Wiper Movement. All right. We'll leave it at that. And Ambrose Weda, who's a lawyer. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That's where we're going to wind up the way it is. But do stay with us right here on Morning Express. We've got some news updates coming up. Then later on, Robin Toscan will be taking us through the events that were taking place over the weekend in terms of sports. Do stay with us right here on Morning Express.